My parents secretly tracked my computer, and stole $290,000 from me to fund my brother's future. My dad actually smirked and thanked me for being naive. But the money they took. It wasn't what they thought, and they're about to regret everything. Alright, let's start from the beginning. My apartment had a familiar scent, something between old books and the lingering smell of late-night coffee. Kinda bland, kinda comforting. For 10 straight years, that little space was my headquarters. My whole focus. Build a future. That future had a number attached to it. Something I checked online at least once a week. 290 grand. That was my number. More than $250,000. Built it up slowly, dollar by dollar, choice by hard choice. Skipped lunches out, brought food from home. Let shoes wear down another season. Turned down vacations that most folks would jump at. Took on freelance work even when I barely had time to breathe. Every single sacrifice added up to that total. But it wasn't just about the money. That number represented everything I'd been working toward, my independence, my discipline, my quiet drive to carve out something of my own. I'd found a place online, a modest home with a small front yard. I'd sit there at night scrolling through listings, imagining myself walking through the door. That house was my anchor. A real home. My future. My life, finally on my terms. Now, my parents, God love them, never held back their opinions when it came to my finances. But this wasn't helpful advice, the kind you'd expect from someone who'd been around the block. No, it was constant nitpicking dressed up as concern. Are you sure that savings account is where you want your money, Luca? My mom would ask every Sunday during our obligatory check-ins. Her tone always had that anxious edge, like she wasn't really asking, more like scolding me. You know inflation's a thing. And real estate just keeps climbing. Maybe think about using some of that cash to help Asher out. Ah, Asher. My younger brother. The golden boy. The guy everything seemed to revolve around. His dreams were top priority, his future the family's main investment. Anything he did, college, random startup ideas that sounded like buzzwords and air, was met with fireworks and open wallets. His tuition. A family-wide campaign of sacrifice. His startup. A vague, overhyped project that somehow still warranted more funding and attention. Meanwhile, I'd worked 2 jobs through school, finished college debt-free, and landed a good, steady gig in engineering. Built my savings quietly, carefully. All I ever got was a quick nod and a, "That's nice, Luca." The moment never lasted. The topic would always shift right back to Asher, his latest grant, his next big pitch, the latest mentor he'd met at some networking event. My role was set in stone. I was the dependable one. The background character. The guy they leaned on but never really saw. The one expected to keep giving without expecting anything in return. I was the solid base they stood on, never realizing, or caring, that they were standing on me. Looking back now, I can't believe how blind I was. I thought all their manipulative little suggestions, the obvious favoritism, were just awkward parenting. I figured they loved me, they just had a weird way of showing it. I told myself their constant push for control came from a good place. That leaning on me was their version of trust. The house I grew up in, back on Cedar Hill, always looked like something out of a catalog. Not a thing out of place. The lawn. Trimmed like a golf course. The living room. Cushions arranged just so. Photos on the mantel carefully positioned to highlight the perfect family moments. Even as a kid, I could sense the act. That place didn't feel lived in, it felt staged. It smelled like my mom's overbearing floral air freshener, pumped through every room like it was covering something up. Maybe it was. And my dad, his voice had that heavy, booming tone that could shut down any real conversation. If things started to get uncomfortable, he'd pivot fast. Back to safe topics. Back to Asher. That savings account, it was kind of a relic, honestly. A leftover from simpler days, or maybe just a reminder of how trusting I used to be. I'd opened it back in high school and, for whatever reason, never updated the mailing address. So even after I moved out, the paper statement still went to my parents' house. Just one of those little things I kept putting off. Worse, I had given them my online login info years ago. Can't even remember the exact reason now. Might have been to split the bill on something, maybe groceries or rent during a visit. Or maybe they offered to help me set it up, and I just let them, figuring, hey, it's family. What's the harm? It was supposed to be a one-and-done thing. Just a moment of convenience, or what felt like typical parental support. I never imagined they'd use that access for anything shady. It felt normal at the time. Families share stuff, right? At least, I thought mine did. Looking back now, there was a sign. Barely noticeable. Like a whisper you almost miss. My work laptop, a newer model, one I used every day, started to feel sluggish. Not just slow, but frustratingly unresponsive. Apps would lock up, files dragged like they were being hauled through wet cement. Web pages spun endlessly. It didn't make sense. I ran every scan I could think of, cleaned up space, disabled background stuff, nothing worked. The problem stuck around like a splinter under the skin. Small, but constant. It slowed everything down, and I chalked it up to aging hardware or just bad luck. And then came the questions. Not outright accusations, but those subtle, sugar-coated jabs during our weekly calls. You're still thinking about buying that house, Luca. Prices are insane these days. Are you sure your savings are growing fast enough? Maybe it's time to rethink the plan. My mom would deliver those lines with that same sweet tone that always carried a blade underneath. It felt like I was being examined, picked apart gently, but still torn open. And during those calls, something would twist inside me. A quiet discomfort. Like my plans weren't private anymore. I tried brushing it off. Told myself I was just on edge because, yeah, buying a house is a big deal. But that feeling lingered. Like someone was peering over my shoulder when I wasn't looking. One night, fed up with the endless lag on my laptop, I opened up Task Manager to see what was running. Most of the stuff looked familiar, standard background tasks, browsers, apps. But one name stood out. Long, technical sounding. Didn't ring any bells. I grabbed my phone, looked it up, and my stomach dropped. The search results were horrifying. That file name was linked to remote monitoring programs. The kind used to track keystrokes, grab screenshots, dig through files. Even turn on webcams and mics. My hands went cold. Why would that be on my laptop? Did I open something I shouldn't have? Was I hacked? But then the pieces started falling into place, like a slow, quiet horror creeping into the corners of my mind. No. It couldn't be them. It couldn't be my parents. But the questions, the odd timing, the access I had given them way back when, it all lined up. My chest tightened as I sat there, staring at the screen, trying not to believe what everything was telling me. Later that night, I logged into my bank account. My fingers felt like lead as I typed. The login screen loaded slow, or maybe it just felt that way because my heart was pounding in my ears. When the dashboard finally came up, I didn't even need to scroll. The balance was almost nothing. Not even enough to pay next month's rent. I made a sound, half gasp, half groan, and frantically clicked through to the transaction history. My eyes darted across the screen, breathing sharp and uneven, until I saw it. One giant transfer. All of it. Gone. Last Tuesday. $290,000. I just stared. The room felt like it tilted, like gravity had shifted sideways. My chest seized up, physically seized, like someone dropped an anvil on my ribs. I couldn't breathe. It was like every inhale scraped against barbed wire. This couldn't be happening. No way. It had to be a mistake. Or a glitch. Or fraud. But not them. Please, not them. Not my parents. Not the people who raised me. I just couldn't accept that. That money, it wasn't just some number in a bank. It was 10 years of discipline, of sacrifice, my shot at finally owning a home. A place where I could breathe on my own terms. And now, it was gone. Just, vanished. The next afternoon, I got in my car and drove straight to their place on Cedar Hill. The entire drive felt like a foggy blur. I was racing through every possible explanation in my head, trying to imagine a version of reality where this wasn't what it clearly looked like. Their house looked exactly like it always did. Picture perfect. The roses in front were trimmed with almost obsessive care. The driveway looked freshly resealed, like a showroom. Inside, the air hit me like a wall, thick with my mom's signature floral air freshener. But this time, it didn't smell like home. It felt suffocating, like perfume sprayed to mask something rotten. Asher was sprawled out on the spotless white couch, casually tapping on his tablet like he didn't have a care in the world. My parents sat across from him. At first, they just looked surprised that I'd shown up unannounced. But that surprise faded fast, replaced by the stiff, guarded expressions I'd seen too many times before. I didn't waste time with hellos. My voice came out thin, shaky. It barely made it past my lips. My savings, I said, the words feeling like they were scraping their way out of my throat. $250,000. It's gone. It was transferred out. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. It was so rehearsed, it could have been part of a stage play. Oh, Luca, that's awful. Were you hacked? Did you click something you shouldn't have? My dad leaned forward, brow furrowed, feigning deep concern. Are you sure you're reading that right, son? You know online banking can be tricky sometimes. I didn't answer. Just pulled out my phone with trembling hands and brought up the transaction history. The screen was slick with sweat. I held it out for them to see, showing them exactly what I saw. There, I said. One transfer. All of it. Last Tuesday. To some account I don't even recognize. They looked at the screen. And something shifted. My mom's carefully made-up face went pale. Dad's jaw tensed. The fake concern slipped just enough for me to catch a glimpse of something colder underneath. The act was falling apart. Then my dad spoke, and his voice changed. The soft concern was gone, replaced by that old, stern tone he used when laying down the law. Well, Luca, he said, sitting up straighter. We facilitated a transfer. Facilitated. For family. That word, facilitated, hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. Facilitated? Without even telling me? That was the money I was going to use for a house. I've been saving for 10 years. 10 years. Mom cut in, her voice sharp now, like I was the one being unreasonable. Oh, don't be so dramatic. This is family money. What's yours is ours, and what's ours is yours. That's how family works. We helped you, remember? When you were just starting out. We invested in you. Invested? I repeated, barely able to get the word out. It felt dirty in my mouth. You didn't invest. You stole. You took the future I built for myself. Dad stood up then. Straightened his spine, filled the room with that familiar booming voice of his, the kind that always shut down dinner conversations and made people nod along, even when they disagreed. Asher finally looked up from his tablet, sensing something had shifted. His brows pulled together, confused. Stole is a pretty strong word, Dad said, like I was the one being unreasonable. Asher needed a final push. His business needed serious capital. This was about securing his future, our family's future. But that was my future, I said, my voice rising, raw and cracked with disbelief. That money was everything I worked for. Everything I gave up. You took all of it. And then, my dad smiled. Not kindly. Not out of sympathy. But the kind of smug, tight-lipped smile that said he was proud of himself. Cold, triumphant. Like he'd won some invisible game I didn't even know I was playing. That moment, right there, it's burned into my memory. Years of being brushed aside, years of one-sided support, all leading to this. He leaned in, lowered his voice like he was confiding something personal. Thanks for your naivety, Luca, he said. Your money just gave your brother a future. Some of us know how to use assets wisely, for the greater good. Something inside me cracked. But it wasn't just grief anymore. It was like a switch flipped. The hurt didn't vanish, but it changed, turned into something colder, harder. A kind of clarity. I looked at them and saw them, really saw them, for the first time. And then something strange happened. My chest tightened again, but not from sadness. From laughter. A dry, bitter chuckle slipped out of me, unexpected and hollow. It wasn't even a real laugh. More like my body didn't know what else to do. It bubbled up and spilled out, and they just stared at me like I'd lost my mind. My dad's smug look started to crack. Mom's eyes narrowed into slits. What in God's name are you laughing at? She snapped. Asher looked like he wanted to crawl out of the room. But I couldn't stop. The laughter kept coming, tinged with disbelief and something new, resolve. You really think you took everything from me? I said, my voice shaking but steadier by the second. You think you got one over on me? That I'm just some sucker? I let the laugh fade, and what was left behind wasn't fear, it was a cold, steel certainty. A half-smile pulled at my lips. One I barely recognized. You really don't get it. The money you took. That wasn't just my savings anymore. The second you took it, you crossed a line you can't uncross. That moment, right then, that was the shift. The shock of it, the gut punch pain, the way it stripped everything I thought I knew right down to the bone. But it didn't break me. If anything, it burned off the last of my blind trust and the stupid hope I still had. What came out the other side was something sharper. Harder. Something forged in betrayal. I didn't fall apart. I locked in. That hopeless feeling got replaced with something else, something cold, precise. I wasn't just out to get my money back anymore. This was about uncovering the truth, pulling back the curtain on the shiny, perfect front they showed the world. And more than anything, it was about keeping myself safe from whatever darkness they'd been hiding. I walked out of their house that day different. I wasn't shattered, I was ignited. There was a chill in me, something laser-focused. That sickly sweet air freshener they always used clung to my jacket like a lie I couldn't shake. I got in my car and drove home, back to my silent apartment where every sound felt like it echoed twice as loud. But I couldn't stay there, not with that creepy software possibly still running in the background, watching me. So I scrubbed my laptop. Wiped it completely. Years of files, memories, photos, all gone. I didn't just clear space, I scorched the earth. Then I grabbed a small bag and headed to Zara's place. Zara's place couldn't have been more different from Cedar Hill. No manicured lawns, no cookie-cutter houses. Her building was older, kind of quirky, full of charm and character. She opened the door, took one look at me, my pale face, wide eyes, and didn't say a word. Just pulled me into the kind of hug that didn't need words. And the smell of her apartment, man, it was nothing like my parents' place. It smelled real. Like brewed coffee, old books, something earthy and grounding. It smelled like life, authentic, warm, safe. When I started talking, the words came out slow at first. I had to force them past the lump in my throat. But once I started, it all came flooding out, the software, the missing money, my dad's cold little smirk, and the twisted laugh that followed. Zara just sat there and listened, her face shifting from sympathy to full-blown fury, right in sync with mine. "Oh, Luke," she said quietly, her voice low and steady. "I always knew they were messed up, the way they treated you, always turning everything into the Asher show, but this is on another level." Cybersecurity wasn't just her job, it was something she lived and breathed. She understood that world in a way I never could. As soon as I told her about the tracking software, she was already in gear. Keyloggers. Remote access. Screen monitoring, she muttered, typing like her fingers had a mind of their own. "It's not just about spying. It's about getting into your life, your bank accounts, your files, anything personal. Especially if you've used that machine for anything sensitive." So we got to work. It was late, but adrenaline and her bottomless supply of strong coffee kept us going. Not on my wiped laptop, of course, but through my online records, old bank statements, access logs, anything we could pull that existed before the wipe. Zara zeroed in on the $290,000 transfer. Turns out it went to a domestic account first. But within hours, it was split and scattered, funneled into a maze of transactions tied to shell companies and faceless corporate accounts. It didn't go to Asher Startup. Not to a business. Not even to a recognizable fund. This was money laundering, plain and simple. This wasn't just a case of greedy parents taking advantage of their son to help their favorite kid. No. This was something bigger. Something organized. A full-blown criminal operation. And my parents? They weren't just manipulative. They were professionals. That money they took from me, it was just one small piece of their larger scheme. They were running a fraud ring, plain and simple. And the more we uncovered, the colder I felt inside. Their perfect image. All that focus on appearances, the constant bragging about Asher's success. That wasn't just family drama. It was a smoke screen. A cover for something a lot darker. It was a lot to take in. But Zara didn't stop. She kept digging, and then she found something else, something way worse. She managed to recover some of the logs from the tracking software. Don't ask me how. It was digital magic, as far as I'm concerned. But what she found made my stomach turn. They had accessed personal files on my machine. My tax returns. Loan documents from years ago. ID verification files. Scanned images of my driver's license. My social security card. It wasn't just about stealing my money. They'd used the software to steal me. They'd taken my identity. They were using it, applying for loans, opening accounts, signing things, leaving a digital trail that could trace everything back to me if things ever blew up. I felt sick. Actually sick. They hadn't just betrayed me. They were setting me up. If this operation got busted, I'd be the one holding the bag. My voice cracked when I said it out loud. They didn't just steal my money, they stole my name. They were trying to make me the scapegoat. And Asher? He was just a shadow at the edge of it all, a painful reminder of how deep this nightmare really ran. Was Asher in on it? That question haunted me. According to Zara's breakdown of the transaction paths, there was nothing that directly tied him to the shell companies or the more complicated parts of the laundering scheme. What we did see was that he received large sums from our parents. So either he was genuinely clueless, happily soaking in the perks of being the golden child without ever stopping to ask where the money came from, or he was turning a blind eye, pretending not to notice, just so long as the cash kept flowing. Either way, he wasn't some mastermind pulling strings. He was more like the star player in a rigged game, one who benefited the most from their crimes, but probably didn't want to look too closely at how the scoreboard worked. His whole world, his image, his shiny version of success, was built on their narrative. And I knew, deep down in a way that made my stomach turn cold, that if push came to shove, he'd side with them. No doubt. He'd have to. Without their story holding up, his whole carefully crafted life would collapse. But what we had now wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was real. Hard proof. We were sitting on a mountain of digital receipts, logs showing exactly when the tracking software had been installed, when it had accessed my files, clear trails tracing the $290,000 through shell companies and fake business accounts. And worst of all, irrefutable evidence that they'd used my identity to pull it all off. And the more we followed the money, the worse it got. We weren't just looking at a few shady transfers. There were hundreds of them, maybe more. Millions of dollars were moving through this machine. And it wasn't victimless. Zara found references to elderly people scammed into phony investments, mom-and-pop stores lured into fake partnerships, families whose savings had just vanished. All of it funneled through this slick operation my parents were running behind closed doors. To the neighbors on Cedar Hill, my parents were upstanding. The kind of folks who threw barbecues, coached soccer teams, smiled for every holiday card. But underneath? They were wolves. Living large off the backs of people who never saw it coming. And all that fake laughing, smug weirdness back at their house when I confronted them, that all made sense now. That laugh wasn't madness. It was ego. Arrogance. A predator thinking they'd won. But what they didn't know was that I had already taken precautions. Weeks before the $290,000 vanished, I'd had this weird gut feeling. I can't even explain it, just a constant unease from strange glitches on my computer and my parents asking odd questions. So I moved my real savings. Quietly. Every last dollar of it, $290,000, got tucked into a brand new account at a completely different bank. One they didn't know about. One they couldn't touch. What they saw in the account they were spying on was a fake out. Just a decoy. A few scheduled transfers here and there to make it look alive, but nothing they'd want to brag about stealing. What they thought they were grabbing wasn't my future, it wasn't even mine at all anymore. Zara traced it. The money they yanked that day. It had been routed through my account just hours earlier, by them. They weren't stealing from me. They were laundering their own dirty cash through my name, thinking my large balance would mask the activity. And by yanking it, they created a perfect trail. One that looped right back to them, tying their fraud network directly to an account under my name, one they'd also been trying to impersonate. The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed again. That same eerie, stunned kind of laugh I'd felt back in their house. They thought they were getting away with something brilliant. But they'd just pulled off the one move that tied them directly to everything. They stole their own trap, I said to Zara, staring at the screen like it might catch fire. The weight of it all was terrifying, yeah, but there was also something darkly satisfying about it. They'd set themselves up, and they didn't even know it. At that point, there was no more gray area. I couldn't just handle this quietly or hope it stayed within family bounds. This wasn't a family betrayal anymore, it was a full-scale criminal enterprise. Too big for me to deal with alone. And the longer we sat on it, the more danger I was in. So Zara and I got to work. We pulled everything together, every log, every screenshot, every transaction. We created a clear timeline, backed with digital evidence, when the spyware was installed, when they accessed my documents, the names of the shell companies, everything we could connect to victims or fraudulent activity. Zara even found screenshots of the spyware interface from a moment when it had popped up unexpectedly. That alone was damning. We looped in the lawyer I'd spoken to earlier, someone with no emotional ties to the story, just facts and expertise. She reviewed everything, front to back, and confirmed what we already knew, this wasn't just serious, it was airtight. She walked us through how to approach law enforcement without putting me at risk, considering my stolen identity was now tied to parts of this network. And because the fraud clearly crossed state lines, and possibly even international boundaries, this was federal. We'd need to talk to the FBI. The next few days were a complete blur. Meetings. Paperwork. Telling the story again and again. Laying out the evidence, file by file. Painful as it was to relive, I knew it had to be done. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person they'd hurt. At first, the agents were reserved, measured, professional. As they should be. But as Zara carefully laid out the digital trail, each piece of data connecting to the next like a web, and I explained the twisted family history and how my account had been compromised, I saw their faces change. That cool detachment shifted into something heavier. Their eyes got sharper. The mood grew still. They started to see it. The laundering. The identity theft. The scope of betrayal. And, most importantly, the number of people who might have been hurt. There wasn't some big Hollywood moment, no courtroom showdown, no slammed gavels or explosive testimony. Justice came with quiet efficiency. Cold. Focused. They moved quickly, gathering the pieces, securing the paperwork. Building their case step by step. They picked a Tuesday morning for the takedown, calculated timing. Both my parents would be at the small, bland office they used to give their operation a respectable front. I wasn't there for the arrest. Zara and I waited nearby. My chest felt like a stretched wire ready to snap. The air had that strange, hollow feeling, like something big was about to break. I could picture it clearly, the hum of a normal morning, desks and coffee cups, maybe a receptionist chatting on the phone. Then the knock. The flash of badges. Calm voices stating charges. The room freezing in that one surreal instant when reality crashes through the door. Later, we pieced together the full story. Zara had contacts, and I got access to the case notes eventually. My dad, always the confident one, went pale as chalk. My mom, the queen of control, completely fell apart. She started babbling, denying, blaming, grasping at anything. It was chaos behind that polished front. Then came the cuffs. Final. Cold. The sound of them clicking shut cut through everything. They tried to squirm their way out of it, of course. Denials, lies, even desperate negotiations. And when none of that stuck, they turned on me. Claimed I was part of it. Tried to make it look like I'd helped, pointing at the compromised accounts, as if that was proof I'd been involved. Like I was the villain in their story now. But the evidence? It was like a freight train. They'd made the transfers themselves. Through my account. Using spyware they'd installed. With documents they'd forged using my identity. You couldn't talk your way out of something that concrete. You couldn't bluff or bully your way past facts burned into the digital record. After that, everything happened fast. What started as a small blip in the local crime report snowballed. Once people saw how big the fraud really was, how many people had been targeted, it exploded. Regional news picked it up. Then national. And just like that, the shiny, perfect mask they'd worn for decades came crashing down. The proud parents from Cedar Hill, the smiling family in all those holiday cards, gone. Their dirty secrets were on full display for everyone to see. But the headlines weren't the worst part. The worst was the ripple effect. The calls. Confused family members. Some supportive, sure, but a lot had been spoon-fed my parents' version of the story for so long, they didn't know what to believe. The judgment, the questions, the sideways glances from neighbors, it all came like a second storm. And Asher. God. He didn't miss a beat. Instead of pausing to think or ask questions, he launched straight into damage control. Not for the victims. Not even for our family. Just for himself. He went ballistic online. Full denial mode. He called me jealous. Bitter. Said I made the whole thing up because I couldn't stand his success. He twisted everything, facts, history, context, just like our parents had always done. He leaned on the same tired script they'd fed him since we were kids. That I was weak. A disappointment. That I was lashing out because I couldn't measure up. He's trying to destroy us, he wrote in one of his rants. Acting like he was the victim. Like I was the one tearing our family apart for no reason. He rallied the last of their loyal friends, stirred up whatever sympathy he could find, and poured gasoline on the fire. And somehow, that final betrayal, public, loud, and deeply personal, cut sharper than all the rest. But at least now I knew exactly where everyone stood.